Hey everybody, I want to talk for a little bit about a huge thing that's happening in the StarCraft scene right now, and that is Flash switching his race to random. I think a lot of people have been asking questions since he made the announcement, and he's playing. Literally tonight, I'm going to be casting him. So it's a very exciting time, and I want to just kind of hit upon all the points as to what is going on with this. So first off, why is he doing this? Why is he switching from Terran to random when he's basically the favorite in every tournament he plays in? Well, first off, he is the greatest player of all time. He really has nothing left to prove. Let's take a look down here in his Wikipedia article. So he won 3 MSLs, he won 3 OSLs, he won 4 ASLs, he won a WCG World Championship, and he won 2 of the GOM Avertech Intel Classic Championships. He is by far the best player of all time. It is really not even close, and there is nothing left for him to prove. Let me show what his ASL career has actually been. So those 4 victories, here's how his ASL career has been, right? He went to StarCraft 2, and he did all right there. He won an IEM, and he had a pretty good win rate with Terran overall, but he switched back right before ASL Season 1 to StarCraft 1. And in ASL Season 1, he ended up getting eliminated in the round of 8 to Last, who was the best Terran that was still playing in StarCraft 1. He lost 3-0 to him there. Okay, so Flash lost in round of 8 when he came back. He won ASL Season 2. He won ASL Season 3. He won ASL Season 4. ASL Season 5 is kind of an interesting turning point. It had the most anti-Terran map pool ever seen in any tournament. And Flash actually mentioned this in an interview that he gave to TeamLiquid.net. Let's take a look. It's an awesome thing to read. So look at this. Motivation for ASL 5 and some final words. Question. The new ASL maps seem quite difficult. Some have said that they pose challenges for Terrans. However, since the maps were released just a short time before the opening of the ASL, is there a chance that you can adapt to the maps faster than others to overcome any imbalances? And Flash's answer. This is a gray area. It is true that I adapt quite fast, but I think the road ahead will be quite tough. However, this has only reinvigorated me. To be honest, winning the last 3 ASLs had drained me of motivation to some extent. This is the good part. After seeing the maps, I surmise that this is how far they must go to stop me. I am extra motivated to show that it is not enough. I am working hard on cracking those maps. It will be tough. Tell me that isn't epic, right? So that was definitely true. That was a ridiculous map pool. The win rate on a bunch of those maps for Terran ended up being 0 in certain matchups. So that season went a little bit too far. And in fact, Flash did not win that season in ASL Season 5. He played the best Protoss versus Terran player ever in the game, Snow, in the round of 8 and lost 2-3 in a very narrow defeat. So Flash was not able to win that one. Then Flash came back into ASL Season 6 and made it all the way to the finals, where he played an old nemesis in Effort. Effort's considered the second best Zerg of all time, and Effort is the only player that is completely undefeated against Flash in best of 5s. He beat him 3-2 in an OSL about 10 years ago, and then he beat him 3-2 in the ASL Season 6 finals. It was a magnificent series. But Effort was able to take Flash down, so only getting to the finals there. Then Flash decided not to play in ASL Season 7. He cited wrist issues. So I guess we just have to take that at face value. He did not play ASL Season 7. Flash came back for ASL Season 8. And he won it. And who did he beat in the finals? He beat Snow, the Protoss player who had eliminated him on the hard maps. And he beat Snow 4-0. It was a really dominating victory. And then in ASL Season 9, which was last season of ASL, Flash made it into the round of 4. And he lost to the eventual champion Zero, aka Queen, and that was a 2-3 map score. In the series, he actually tried to win purely off of mind games and strategy. It was not how Flash will normally play a tournament because his macro and his micro and everything are all top tier, but he tried to win in an almost completely strategic way. And he even said in an interview afterwards that he felt it would be more satisfying to win like that. So that already feels like last season he was kind of playing around, not necessarily bringing his ultimate strength and his absolute best strategies. But I mean, obviously Zero is a great player as well, so I don't want to take anything away from him there. So taking a look at that, right? Flash played in 8 ASLs. He won 4 of them. He made the top 4 in another, the finals in another, and round of 8 in 2, right? So that is an unbelievably dominant position. In fact, it's become kind of crazy in ASL how strong he is, just how strong he is as a player, because when other players are being interviewed, they always have to mention him. Even he won't even be in a group, right? It'll be early on in the tournament. They'll be like, "Oh, you're the best Protoss in the world or something. Do you think you can win this tournament?" And they're like, "Well, I mean, I can do well until I hit Flash." You know, those types of things happen in interviews all the time. So basically, Flash doesn't really have anything left to prove. Playing random is a new challenge for Flash, and you know, I guess I guess that's why he's doing it. He wants something to motivate himself. Now I want to clear up some misconceptions on the rules behind playing random. A lot of people have asked about some of these things. For instance, do you have to tell your race to your opponent when you get it? The answer is absolutely not. No, that would make random even more unplayable than random already is. Yeah, I mean, that would take away so much from the race. They have to scout Flash. They have to actually check and see what he is to be able to play against him in that way. Also, some people have asked, like, what about race picking? Can he decide for certain maps or something to choose race? The answer to that is a hard no as well. You have to declare your race before a professional tournament and play that race throughout. There have been race pickers in the past, but that can lead to really terrible situations where you both race pick against your opponent's race. How would you solve something like that? That becomes too much of a kind of grayish area on rules, and so that hasn't been allowed for at least 20-ish years, maybe 18 years, 19 years. So yeah, you're not allowed to do that. Flash will just be random every single game, and when his opponents find him, there you go, they know his race. All right, let's talk about the history of random players a little bit to put this into some context. There hasn't been a professional random player since about 2002-ish, 2003-ish. The best random pro was really considered CHRH or Chura. He played random way back, like year 2000, maybe year 2001, and then he switched over to playing Terran. Despite the fact that he was actually a better Protoss player, he had a higher win rate when he got Protoss, he preferred Terran. So he did switch into the Terran race from there and was still a reasonably successful pro at that point. Some notable people, I believe Elky played his last Star League with random, but didn't win any maps. Gur, at the beginning of his career, was a random player, but went into Protoss as his professional career picked up. Other than that, there was stories before I Love Uv, who is one of the Terran Bonjois, one of the greatest players of all time, and the only player really that you can kind of mention around Flash level dominance for his era. There were stories about him being able to play each race and beat his opponents with them, even top ranked pro gamers with all the races. But he never played random professionally; was always a Terran player. There was, you know, occasionally we've seen, like, for instance, I remember one game where Choja, one of the geniuses of StarCraft, a Zerg player, wasn't allowed to go Zerg on a map. I think his team had in Pro League chosen Zerg for that map the previous week, so he went random against the Zerg and actually did a giant Marine Medical and won against his opponent there. But that's not really playing Zerg professionally. It's going or random professionally. That is going random one time. In the foreign scene, we've had a little bit of random. I think Ariador is the only, or Liquid Drone is the only player that truly is random and a high tier player. I know that Testy, a lot of people said he was random. He did play random some, but really he was a Protoss player. His other races were far behind. Historically, for people that play random, and people know this when they play on the ladder and everything, generally, Terran is the race that random players have a harder time with. Some of the things like, for instance, Terran versus Terran, that takes a long time to learn. It's a very strategic matchup that has a lot to it. So random players will have a hard time with that. And then, Marine Micro against Mutalisks and that type of thing. The ins and outs of holding Protoss rushes. So generally, Terran is the weakest for random players, which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about the theoretic strengths for Flash as being a random player. So he's a Terran player, so he already kind of gets around what is normally hobbling a lot of players that are trying to play random. Terran is his best race by far, so that's really going to help him. It should be mentioned, right? Already, his Terran is favored against everyone in the world. So when he's going random and he gets Terran, it's even more favored because his opponents don't know that he's starting with Terran and he knows their starting race. So his Terran is actually much scarier. I've seen some of the pros actually talk about this, where it's like, it's already impossible to flash his Terran, but if he goes random into Terran, it's, you can't really do anything at that point. He's just so strong. Some of the other theoretic strengths here for Flash. First off, we know that his Protoss is really good. There was a point in time where Flash's Terran was #1 rank on the StarCraft Remastered ladder, and his Protoss was #7 rank. And his Protoss actually had the second highest win rate amongst top Protosses on that ladder as well. So his Protoss, we know, is very, very strong. And also, just playing random, obviously you have that advantage against your opponents because they don't know your race, but that advantage gets a little bit stronger in different situations. For instance, playing against Protoss, it's really important for Protoss to know the race that they're up against. The early building placements, even the very first pylon, is crucial for Protoss. If you're playing against Zerg, your first pylon has to be out at your first expansion. It has to be part of your wall where you're going to build your other buildings. The timings of Protoss versus Zerg are so sharp. You have to find where they are by a certain point in time. You have to have your wall getting up, your forge, your cannons, things like that. The thing is, if you just play as if they are Zerg and you have your pylon out there and you make a gateway out there, that can work against Terran. You can place your buildings like that against Terran. It's okay. You can put some pressure on and things like that. Against Protoss, you're going to be heavily punished. So then it's like, well, do you build your pylon in your main base? Well, if you're playing against Zerg, suddenly it's really hard to take your natural expansion. They can really keep a lot of pressure on you and prevent you from doing so. So I would say overall, this random switch gives him the most potential power against Protoss players. Also, we should talk about the maps for a moment in this ASL Season 10, right? Because that's a big part of it. The maps play a lot into the random race. So for instance, Benzene and Eclipse, these two maps are both 2-player maps. So his opponents on these maps will be able to just go scout him instantly. They will know exactly where he is, and they can just go check what race he is and play accordingly against that. It'll still give him a little edge in that regard because you have to send a scout out. Like, when are you going to send your scout out? What time? But those two maps are probably the ones that people are going to have the easiest time against Flash on. Let's jump over to Plasma. Plasma is a map that is a semi-island map. So you can't actually attack your opponent early on. It's a little bit harder to scout your opponent, but you can send SCVs, probes, drones, etc. through to scout where he is. But that one plays very weirdly. I'm kind of feeling like there's going to be a lot of vetoes on Plasma against Flash, because that is going to be hard to open correctly. But maybe not, because it is a little bit islandy. People are not going to be afraid of being rushed. So maybe that actually becomes a good map against random. That's the one that I'm kind of up in the air about right now. The other maps, Optimizer, Polypoid, Ringing Bloom, Shakura's Temple, these are all 4-player maps. So randomness plays a huge factor in this because you simply don't know when you're going to scout your opponent. For instance, if you scout them last, that's very, very late. You get to the last base almost 4 minutes into the game a lot of the time with Terran, for instance. Not knowing, like, if you scout him first, great, you have that information a lot earlier on. But if you scout him last, then his random advantage can get harder and harder for you. You know, a lot of the races have to also do... You can choose different ways to play against random, of course. You could just pretend. You can be like, I think he got Protoss, and play against Protoss. But 2/3 of the time, you're going to be wrong. So what a lot of people do is do a build that's strong against 2/3 of the races and is doable against the other race. Because that's about as good as you can get for build orders. So those all look like some pretty strong advantages for Flash, right? Those are the theoretic strengths as being a random player, in my view at least. Let's talk about the theoretic weaknesses of what's going to be happening here with Flash playing random. I think micromanagement is a big piece of this. He just shouldn't be as good in micro situations as his opponents. You know, players that have been microing Dragoons, controlling Dragoons perfectly in Protoss vs. Protoss for 15 years should probably have better micro than Flash. I mean, I'm as much a believer in Flash's unbelievable god tier skill as anyone, but that seems a reasonable thing to say. So I think that Protoss vs. Protoss could be very difficult because of that. Zerg vs. Zerg, the same. It's hard for me to imagine Flash beating a championship caliber Zerg in Mutalisk Scourge versus Mutalisk Scourge. That's something that they practice all day, every day, for years and years and years and years. And to think that this Terran Gods micro with Mutalisks will be that good, it feels to me like in Zerg vs. Zerg and Protoss vs. Protoss specifically, he's going to have to get strategic victories. Victories where it doesn't come down to just pure control of Dragoon versus Dragoon. Reaver pushes, and those can have a lot of micromanagement involved in them as well. You know, thinking about the Zergling micro back and forth and pulling drones and slipping those around, and microing your mutas versus Scourge, those types of things. Those don't seem like easy situations for Flash to be able to beat these world-class players in. So I think that those are going to be a couple of very hard matchups where he's really looking to win a strategic battle where he gets the upper edge via his opponent not knowing his race right off the bat. I also think his Protoss versus Zerg could be a little bit suspect here. Protoss versus Zerg, there's a lot of very tight things. It's kind of like Terran versus Protoss, where if you don't play Terran as your main race, when you play against Protoss, you're going to have a hard time because there's a ton of very small things that you do to prevent a lot of things that can kill you. That's definitely the case in Protoss vs. Zerg, especially in the early game. If Flash can get into the late game, I can see him playing very well in Protoss vs. Zerg, but, some of these very tight things like exactly when to move, your probes to the front, where to put your zealots exactly, the cannon timings, things like that, those could be very difficult for him. Another weakness that I would say should exist, but might not now in this tournament, I was thinking to myself, is Zerg versus Terran. Zerg versus Terran, you have to be like really high level with your Mutalisk harassment and your strategy there. And while I think he'll be very good at Zerg versus Terran overall, in my mind, I couldn't see any way for Flash to end up beating someone like Light's caliber, right? Light is the best Terran player in the world aside from Flash. So I couldn't imagine that, but luckily for Flash, there's only one Terran left in the tournament. So any of his versus Terran matchups, he's not likely needing to worry about as much. So yeah, those are kind of the theoretic weaknesses that come to mind here for Flash. It's going to be interesting this tonight, especially. Flash is playing random, especially because there's no concrete metagame. There's no concrete theory behind playing random at this level. People will play random on the ladder and play against each other, with random and have ideas about what they want to do. But I think Flash is going to have really thought this out. And that's going to be really fun to see. I think we're going to learn a lot about what he perceives to be the strongest way to play. For instance, if his first match is going to be against Free. It's going to be on Shakur's Temple, a 4-player map, a big 4-player map. And we're going to see what he thinks based on the race he gets is going to counter what he thinks his opponent will do. And then it's also going to be interesting to see what the other players that he plays against, what the other pros end up deciding to do. Do they play aggressively? Do they play defensively and try to absorb him, thinking that he's not going to be quite as good with 2 of the races? It's really hard to say, but it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's take a look at the group he's going to be playing real quick. We see Flash, Free, Snow, Hero. Here's my honest take on this. I think Flash is going to beat Free. It's a best of 1 on a 4-player map. There's a lot of ways where he can get lucky. 1 would be getting Terran. 2, he gets scouted late, right? 3, I mean, he could just get Zerg and Free has his pylon in the wrong spot. So I look at this and I think that he will be able to probably take out Free. Free is also one of the weakest players in the round of 16. Yeah, honestly, it's like the weakest players in the round of 16 were Free and Leda. So Flash got a good choice here, and it's the weakest Protoss player, which is the race I think most affected playing against random. Looking at these other 2 matchups, it gets very difficult because I feel like these are, Hero is a finalist of GSO. It's actually someone that Flash beat in ASL season 3, I want to say 3 or 4. So Hero is an excellent Zerg player. He's in very good shape right now. That's going to be tough. Obviously, when Flash randoms into Terran against him, it'll be all right. The other 2 matchups, I think, are going to be hard. Playing against Snow. Snow, in my mind, is the best Protoss in the world, and I think he's actually the favorite to win this tournament. Now, Protoss has a hard time, but Snow is one of the only Protosses that I can see even winning against Flash in Protoss versus Terran, let alone the other matchups, right? I think Snow is awesome at all 3 matchups. So it's a hard group, but there's a lot of randomness involved, literally. I think Flash can make it out, and I think it's going to be absolutely insane if he does. So definitely make sure you check out either the ASL Live or on VOD. Those are my thoughts. So let me know what yours are down below. Thanks for watching.